While the world is dealing with major global headlines, conflict in the Middle East, tension in Eastern Europe, and growing economic uncertainty, an unexpected story has united a large corner of the internet. Logan Paul is reportedly under investigation by the FBI. For many, it came as a surprise. For others, it felt inevitable. The internet, known for its short memory and fast-paced reactions, suddenly found itself paying close attention to a case that could have serious implications. Because if true, these allegations could mark one of the biggest shifts in the public's perception of Logan Paul since his original rise to fame. When Coffeezilla released his investigation into CryptoZoo, Logan Paul didn't issue a refund or offer a public explanation. Instead, he filed a defamation lawsuit. His claim? That Coffeezilla's videos harmed his reputation. But here's where things took a turn. By filing a lawsuit, Logan unintentionally opened the door to legal discovery, a process that allows both parties to gather and examine documents, communications, and evidence. In other words, Logan's decision to take this to court gave Coffeezilla the right to look even deeper. And with that, more information came to light. Internal messages, team conversations, and behind-the-scenes decisions around CryptoZoo started surfacing. Suddenly, the courtroom wasn't just a place to settle a dispute. It became a stage where the truth would be placed under a microscope. Meanwhile, Logan's own text messages were entered into evidence. In them, he appeared to admit that part of his motivation for the lawsuit was to cause difficulties for Coffeezilla personally. That revelation didn't help his case, legally or publicly. Instead of shifting the narrative, the lawsuit backfired. It drew more attention to the original accusations and raised even more questions about Logan's conduct behind the scenes. While Logan pursued his legal strategy, Coffeezilla was quietly doing something else. Behind the scenes, he had submitted detailed whistleblower reports to both the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and the FBI. These weren't casual tips or social media complaints. They were structured, evidence-backed submissions, complete with documentation, financial trails, and communications between CryptoZoo team members. According to public records, these reports were taken seriously. Not long after, Logan Paul reportedly received a subpoena. Federal agencies began requesting access to his communications and devices. The case was no longer limited to online criticism or a civil lawsuit. It had officially crossed over into a federal investigation. The SEC even acknowledged Coffeezilla's contribution, noting that his reports were comprehensive and helpful. For the first time, it became clear that this wasn't just about a failed project. This was about potential securities violations and whether investors had been misled by promotional promises that didn't reflect the actual state of the product. And through it all, Coffeezilla kept his focus. He didn't escalate the drama. He simply continued doing what he's known for, tracking facts, presenting them clearly, and letting the truth come forward. As Logan Paul's legal team prepared for trial, they made another move, filing a motion for confidentiality. The goal was simple: keep certain documents and communications sealed from the public. According to their filing, some of the material was said to be highly sensitive, potentially damaging to Logan's personal or professional reputation if released. But that request had the opposite effect. Instead of containing the story, it amplified it. News outlets and content creators began discussing what Logan might be trying to keep hidden. In the process, the details of the motion itself, including references to ongoing investigations, became widely known. The phrase "Logan Paul is under federal investigation" started appearing in headlines, thumbnails, and reaction videos. For Logan, it was a significant shift. What began as a defamation lawsuit now included mentions of FBI activity, SEC subpoenas, and concerns over how investor funds had been handled. And for many observers, that changed everything. Logan Paul's legal team faced a difficult challenge. To win a defamation lawsuit, the person filing the case must prove that the statements made about them were false, harmful, and delivered with reckless disregard for the truth. That's not easy under normal circumstances. It's even harder when those statements are backed by documentation and federal inquiries. Worse still, the court process meant Logan would likely need to testify. And that raised a problem. Anything said under oath could also be used in ongoing investigations. If Logan chose to remain silent, it could weaken his position in court. If he chose to speak, he could expose himself to further legal risk. Either option came with consequences. Meanwhile, Coffeezilla's position remained consistent. He shared what he found, he documented his process, and he made clear that his videos were based on real communications and verifiable facts. In a courtroom, that kind of clarity can make a big difference. For Logan Paul, the case that was supposed to protect his name was quickly becoming the source of more scrutiny than ever before. Outside the courtroom, public perception was shifting. For years, Logan Paul worked to rebuild his image. After early controversies, he invested heavily in rebranding, positioning himself as more mature, more thoughtful, and more responsible. He launched new businesses, collaborated with major creators, and stayed active in the mainstream spotlight. But the CryptoZoo controversy, and especially the lawsuit against Coffeezilla, caused many to revisit that narrative. Audiences began asking, had Logan really changed, or had he just become better at managing PR? Old clips resurfaced. Past statements were re-examined, and the gap between Logan's public messaging and the private details emerging from court filings became harder to ignore. On social media, discussions shifted from admiration to skepticism, and through it all, one key takeaway became clear. Reputation management only works when it aligns with the facts. Once the facts begin to contradict the message, audiences notice. Throughout this process, Coffeezilla's approach remained remarkably steady. From the moment he began covering CryptoZoo, he focused on one thing: transparency. He didn't speculate wildly. He didn't attack personally. He simply gathered information, asked questions, and gave people a platform to share their stories. When Logan Paul responded with threats of legal action, Coffeezilla didn't panic. He followed through. He complied with court procedures. And when it came time to defend his reporting, he submitted well-documented evidence, both publicly and privately. His legal filings included sources, timelines, screenshots, and corroborating details from developers, investors, and blockchain records. More importantly, he stayed professional. Even as online conversations grew heated, he didn't retaliate or escalate. He let the case speak for itself. And when Coffeezilla shared a footnote in a filing stating that Logan Paul is not unique, it wasn't meant as an insult. It was a reminder. This wasn't personal. It was part of a larger pattern of online figures promising more than they delivered, and being held accountable when the truth surfaced. By early 2024, the situation had clearly expanded beyond the original CryptoZoo controversy. Public records revealed that federal agencies, including the SEC and FBI, had taken a formal interest in the case. Subpoenas were issued, digital records were requested, and according to legal documents, Logan Paul himself had become a subject of inquiry. This was no longer about social media reactions or creator drama. It was about whether certain activities violated federal law, particularly in regard to investor disclosures, crypto asset management, and possible misrepresentations to the public. While Logan maintained that he had done nothing wrong, the fact that multiple government bodies were requesting information sent a strong message. The concerns raised were being taken seriously. Coffeezilla, meanwhile, quietly cooperated. According to correspondence made public through court filings, regulators described his submitted materials as well-prepared and thorough. His efforts were helping shape the scope of the investigation. It was now clear that the story had entered a new chapter, one that could carry real consequences beyond the internet. The lawsuit's discovery process, which Logan Paul initiated by suing Coffeezilla, turned out to be a turning point. Discovery is a legal stage where both sides can request documents, ask questions, and review communications. It's designed to help the court see the full picture, and in this case, it did just that. Internal group chats were revealed. Business discussions within the CryptoZoo team became public. Statements made in private were contrasted with Logan's public messaging. What emerged was a portrait of a project that may not have lived up to what was promised, and a growing list of questions about how investor funds were used, why the project stalled, and whether key figures were fully transparent with the public. Ironically, the very lawsuit that was supposed to protect Logan Paul's name became the reason so much previously unknown information surfaced. And as each document was reviewed, more observers, from legal commentators to fans, began to wonder whether filing the lawsuit had been a strategic misstep. For Coffeezilla, however, discovery validated his original reporting. Much of the information he had shared turned out to align with what was being revealed through court records. And for audiences watching closely, the situation was no longer about opinions. It was about evidence. As the case moved forward, attention turned to one key issue: whether Logan Paul would testify. In most defamation cases, the person who brings the lawsuit is expected to take the stand. They need to explain why the statements made about them were false and how those statements caused harm. But in this situation, testifying presents unique risks. Logan is also reportedly under investigation by federal agencies. Anything he says in court could potentially be used in those investigations. If he avoids testifying, it may weaken his civil case. But if he does testify and says something inaccurate, it could lead to further legal problems. It's a difficult position, one that legal experts refer to as a no-win scenario. On the other side, Coffeezilla doesn't face the same risk. He's not the one being investigated, and he's not the one who filed the case. His legal team can rely on a well-documented timeline of research, reporting, and correspondence. As the trial date approaches, the question of whether Logan will testify or can safely do so remains a major point of speculation. Logan Paul's lawsuit wasn't just about legal claims. It was also about image, about reclaiming the version of himself he had worked hard to promote. For years, Logan emphasized that he had grown past earlier controversies. He partnered with respected brands, launched businesses, and collaborated with some of the internet's biggest creators. But the CryptoZoo case revealed a different side, one where business decisions were challenged, communication was questioned, and investor trust was called into doubt. Reputation, once shaped by edited videos and public apologies, was now being tested in a legal setting. And in court, stories don't win, facts do. Coffeezilla, by contrast, continued to frame the situation around documentation and due diligence. His platform wasn't built on celebrity. It was built on consistency, taking a calm, methodical approach to online investigations and letting evidence guide the story. As each filing came in and each update reached the public, more people began to recognize the difference between messaging and substance, and increasingly, it was the substance that mattered. As the legal proceedings developed, one element consistently stood out: the strength of documentation. Coffeezilla didn't rely on speculation or assumptions. He brought forward detailed records, transaction logs, blockchain analysis, investor statements, internal messages, and direct interviews. Every piece of content he released had supporting materials behind it. That level of preparation mattered. It showed that his videos weren't simply commentary, they were backed by real investigation. And when government agencies reviewed his submissions, they found them useful enough to move forward with inquiries of their own. On the other hand, Logan Paul's defense focused heavily on intent. His legal team argued that Coffeezilla may have caused reputational harm, but they struggled to disprove the accuracy of the facts being presented. Because in a courtroom, what matters most is not how something sounds, but whether it's true. And time after time, evidence continued to support what Coffeezilla had originally reported. Logan Paul's decision to file a lawsuit was meant to quiet the controversy, but instead, it amplified everything. This phenomenon, known as the Streisand effect, happens when an attempt to suppress information ends up drawing even more attention to it. In Logan's case, the lawsuit became the very reason more people learned about CryptoZoo, the missing features, and the whistleblower reports. It also led to major headlines: FBI reportedly investigating Logan Paul, SEC subpoenas issued in CryptoZoo case, court filings reveal confidential communications. These weren't fan theories or reaction videos, they were the result of verified documents entering the public record. And for Logan Paul, the headlines kept building. Each legal motion, each public filing, each response only pulled the spotlight further onto the story. Instead of protecting his brand, the lawsuit had the opposite effect, turning a controversy into a case study in how digital reputation, legal action, and transparency intersect. As more details surfaced, one underlying theme became clearer. This story wasn't just about one influencer. It was about accountability in a changing digital world. CryptoZoo had been promoted as a new, exciting project backed by one of the internet's biggest names. But when the product failed to deliver and real people reported losing money, questions followed. And those questions deserved answers. What makes this case different is how the response unfolded. Rather than addressing concerns publicly or offering refunds, Logan Paul turned to legal action. And that decision opened the door for greater scrutiny, not just from the media, but from federal regulators and financial watchdogs. Meanwhile, creators like Coffeezilla continued to show the role independent voices can play. His research, once considered just a YouTube exposé, became part of a larger legal and financial investigation. At its core, the CryptoZoo controversy is a reflection of the world we now live in, where creators are also business leaders, where audiences are also customers, and where transparency matters more than ever. As of now, Logan Paul's legal case is still unfolding. Court dates remain on the calendar. Legal teams continue to exchange filings, and investigators are reportedly still reviewing materials related to CryptoZoo and other crypto-related promotions. The outcome remains uncertain, but one thing is already clear. This case has reshaped how people view online accountability. It has reminded audiences that influence comes with responsibility, and that when something goes wrong, simply deleting a video or issuing a statement might not be enough. For Coffeezilla, the story continues. His platform has grown, not because of drama, but because of trust built on patience, careful reporting, and a clear focus on the facts. And for viewers following the story, the lesson is simple. In a digital world where projects move fast and promises come easy, asking questions isn't negativity, it's necessary. Thanks for watching. This story isn't just about one influencer or one failed project. It's a case study in how digital fame, finance, and accountability are more connected than ever. Whether or not Logan Paul faces legal consequences, the lessons from CryptoZoo are already clear. Transparency matters, promises carry weight, and audiences deserve the truth, especially when money is involved. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing. We cover stories where facts matter more than hype and where the internet holds itself accountable. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp, and as always, ask questions. Follow the evidence, and don't fall for easy answers. This is MrStream. See you in the next one.